guys. It is Monday, February 24th, 2025. My name is Tony. This is my podcast, and welcome to it. I grew up eating foods that most Canadian kids would not have touched. My dad was from Paraguay, my mom from South Africa, and between the two of them, um, and their unique cultural backgrounds, my siblings and I got used to meals that didn't always look familiar. Most of the time, I don't think we really minded, but there was one meal when I was about 6 years old that I wanted no part of. It looked wrong. It felt wrong, and I was sure that I was going to hate it. That night, I learned a lesson that I've carried with me ever since. Not just about food, but about how we form opinions, how we defend them, and why too many people think that they're entitled to an opinion that they've never actually earned. Anyways, one night we all sat down for supper, and my dad put a serving platter on the table. And when I looked at what was in front of me on that platter, I instantly recoiled. It was long, dark, and slimy looking, and definitely not something that I wanted on my plate. Ew, I blurted out. And my dad responded with, "It's just a fish, and you like fish." And I said, "That's not a fish, it's a snake." "It's not a snake, it's an eel," my dad said. He was already starting to lose his patience. "An eel is just a long fish." And I said to him, "Well, I don't like eel." That didn't seem to matter to my dad because he started serving plates, and I sat there with my arms crossed, determined that this thing was not going anywhere near my mouth. After my dad said grace, everyone started eating. Everyone except me. "What's wrong with your food, son?" my dad asked. "I don't like it." "How do you know if you haven't tasted it?" he asked. I shook my head. I knew I didn't like it. I didn't need to try it to be sure. Now, at this point, my dad had had enough. He walked around the table and stood next to me. And in that moment, I panicked because I was positive I was about to get hit. Instead, he leaned in and he said, "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to wipe that look off your face. You're going to take a bite. You're going to chew. You're going to swallow. Then, and only then, will you have earned the right to have an opinion about eel." As I'm sure you can understand, I wasn't happy about it, but I took a bite. I chewed, I swallowed, and I hated it. I expected dad to force me to eat more, but instead he just smiled at me. He said, "I didn't expect you to like it. Your mother and I like eel, but we figured you kids wouldn't. So we made burgers for you. We just wanted you to try something difficult so that you could learn an important lesson. And that lesson is that nobody's entitled to an opinion until they know what they're talking about. You thought you hated eel, and I ignored you. Now you know you hate eel, and I can respect that. Don't ever forget this meal." Obviously, that meal wasn't really about the eel. It was about something much bigger, something I didn't fully appreciate until years later. Too often we hear people say, "Everyone's entitled to their own opinion." It's a phrase that gets thrown around as if it makes every perspective equally valid. But my dad didn't believe that, and neither do I. He taught me that an opinion only has value if it's informed. At 6 years old, I was completely convinced that I hated eel. I had never tasted it, I'd never smelled it, never seen it up close before that night, but that didn't stop me from making a loud and confident declaration that it was disgusting. And that's exactly what people do all the time. We see it everywhere. People form strong opinions on topics they've never studied. They argue about ideas they've never examined. They dismiss entire cultures, communities, or perspectives that they've never engaged with. And the saddest thing is they do it with complete certainty. I see it in politics where people repeat slogans and talking points without ever questioning where they came from or whether they're going to hold up under scrutiny. I see it in religion where people defend beliefs they inherited, not because they've explored them deeply, but because not believing has never felt like an option. I see it in conversations about race, gender, economics, and history, where people cling to assumptions that were passed down to them, but never stopping to ask, is this true? Do I actually know what I'm talking about? But if you don't challenge yourself, if you don't explore an idea from multiple angles, if you've never stepped outside your own perspective, then what are you really basing your opinion on? Because if all you're doing is repeating what you've been told or clinging to an assumption you've never questioned, then you don't actually have an opinion. You have a reflex. And I think that's dangerous. That night at the dinner table, my dad didn't just make me try eel. He forced me to confront the fact that I had been wrong and that I had been wrong with absolute confidence. He made me realize that I had spoken as though I had all the information when in reality I had none. And that realization changed something in me. It planted a seed of doubt, not in a way that made me feel weak, but in a way that made me feel aware. I started to notice how often I assumed I knew things without actually knowing them. As I got older, I realized how easy it is to think you're informed when all you've done is hear one side of the story. It's easy to believe you understand something when you've only ever seen it through a narrow lens. That's why I've made it a rule in my life. If I'm going to have a strong opinion about something, I need to be able to defend it. Not with slogans, not with feelings, but with actual knowledge. That doesn't mean I need to be an expert on everything, but it does mean that I need to be willing to listen, to learn, and to question my own assumptions. Because here's what I've learned: the people with the most certainty are usually the people with the least experience. And I'd rather be uncomfortable than ignorant. This isn't just about food or childhood lessons. It's about how we navigate the world. We live in a time when it's easier than ever to form opinions without effort. Social media gives us quick sound bites, cherry picked facts, and outrage fueled arguments that make it feel like we're informed. But a headline isn't research, a meme isn't an argument, and a gut feeling, sorry, it isn't evidence. If we want to have opinions that actually mean something, we have to be willing to do the work. That means reading things that challenge us. It means listening to people we disagree with. It means accepting that sometimes we might be wrong, and that's okay. Being wrong isn't a failure, it's an opportunity to learn. So before you decide you hate something, before you argue against something you've never actually looked into, before you dismiss an idea, a person, or an entire way of thinking, ask yourself if you've earned that opinion. Because if you haven't, maybe it's time to take a bite. Thanks for listening. Until next time, take care of yourself, stay curious, and don't be afraid to taste that eel.